from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And I want to give you the phone number if you want to join the conversation. Feel free, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, we always start with a few things that are going on in the news and what we're going to talk about tonight. But technical issues are preventing that from happening. So, we're going to talk about Bernstein, Jared Bernstein. He is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and he's talking about the struggles of the government in just printing all the money that they want. Listen to this.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar, so why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets... Some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds, and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah, so. A lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money, and then it uses that money to, I guess I can't really talk, I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about, because it's like, the government clearly prints money, it does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
Nothing confusing. Oh, that's exactly it. This is exactly what our government does and has done for a long time. And a lot of people take exception to this. Maybe I'm part of the club that doesn't take exception to it as much. But because, why? It's been like that my entire life. I've never lived in the United States that didn't have fiat currency. I haven't lived in the United States where we didn't lend money on treasury bonds. And how do we get the treasury bonds? Well, we print the money. to borrow the money, the Fed borrows, buys the treasury bonds. And some other people do as well. And it's those people that are likely going to stop buying them as this economy begins to dry up. But there's been a lot of focus on this, and I think Trump has been probably one of the catalysts for this with bringing this, up. And I think he's been doing it for his whole life, right? As long as Trump has been around, he's been talking about our economy. And these are issues that are, very, very old issues, unresolved. And it makes you wonder, do we make a return to a gold standard or a gold-backed or asset-backed currency? I think there's a lot of people that feel we have to get back to that. And if we don't, we're screwed. I would tend to agree with that. I don't know what the trajectory is. I don't know how much longer we can play with this house of cards that we've created. But I would venture to say that the modern American politician is incredibly adept at playing this game of selling their vote for whatever they can sell it for. And I'm talking about Congress in general, not anyone in particular. And and how to print enough money to take things up to the line and bring it back. And they using this game that we play when we create inflation by printing money, then we raise interest rates to slow our economy so that we can bring interest rates back down. I mean, it really is just a quite a bizarre way of doing things, from a layman like me. But that is how it works. And I feel that most politicians, most presidents, past presidents, they've figured out, these are the guardrails, and you can't go this far. You can get into debt, you can do this, but you can't let unemployment get too high because you do that. You can't, your GDP will go down, and there's a couple of metrics that they manage and they stay within, or they try to stay close to. Granted. But when you have a Biden in office, right? A Build Back Better, an American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, all these plans that cost money, print money, and increase inflation, now we're in bad shape. And that's what puts us in the shape we're in, where people are realizing, all right, so we've bought these treasury bonds. The value of them is not what they once were. And given the inflation that's in place here, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for them to cash them out because they're never going to cash. They're not going to make the money they thought they were making. And that is part of the problem. So when I, contemplate about BRICS and these other ideas that are out there that are coming for the dollar, one can only really speculate or think or imagine that the only way to go is back to a gold standard, tying the dollar to a gold standard, or actually gold-backed currency, like having it in Fort Knox and saying this is how much we have, this is how much it's worth, it's tied to the price of gold, and we have the gold to back it up. I think that makes sense. I don't know if that's happening. I don't see anybody campaigning on that, but there's a ton of people that are really interested in seeing that happen. So when we hear Jared Bernstein from the White House Economic Council, and he just explains in a manner that seems like he doesn't even understand how this works, it's concerning. It's concerning to see that these are the people that Joe Biden has put into place. Very concerning. So just keep that in the back of your mind the next time you think about the reports, right? There's reports that are coming out every day, and financial, economic reports, and they're not all great. They're not all great at all. Now, one of the reports that came out today that I wanted to share with you, I'll pull it up during the break because this thing is freezing up right now. But it was a rather disheartening, honestly. It was a disheartening report, and one that I think we need to get a handle of because, again, we've got China. Well, let's see, who's in BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, right? BRICS, I think that's how it goes. And a bunch of other small nations that have recently jumped on. So if we don't want these guys to collectively get together and eventually come up with a currency, probably some sort of crypto that's asset-backed, and eat our lunch, proverbially, we've got to get it in gear. One thing I can tell you is that with Joe Biden, we're not getting anything in gear. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back. I am Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 5337 833 4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, welcome back. And we continue, get the reaction from former President Trump, who was outside the New York courtroom today, earlier this morning, and gave some commentary on these job numbers. Listen to this.
They've asked me to speak a little bit about the job numbers, and the job numbers just came out, and they're horrible. And they're very, and I say that not happily, I say that very unhappily. But the numbers are horrible. It's just these people are destroying our country. Here's another sign of it. So as you probably know, before I did, the job numbers came out. They're really, really low, really bad. Our economy's bad, and now it's starting to show. So you'll see, and it'll only get worse. It'll only get worse. We're only going one way with the so-called leadership.
One way with the leadership. Anyway, we know which way that is. Down the tubes. Now, the U.S. economy added 175,000 jobs in April, falling short of the expectation. And the, let me see here. I wanted to just get into this. The jobless rate went up to 3.9% in April. That's according to the Department of Labor data that was released earlier today. Now, what's happening is April's employment gains fell short of what economists were expecting of 240,000 new jobs. Instead, we got 175,000 new jobs. And the unemployment rate they expected was 3.8. It came in at 3.9. So this ended a period of, based on that number, of a pretty low unemployment rate. And the latest report comes just after the Federal Reserve voted to hold off on cutting interest rates. So this is, and they're in the range now of 5.25% to 5.5%. But again, most banks are making some money on that, more than a quarter point, more than half a point. So most people are, paying 7.5%, 8% when they go for a loan. And again, these are the highest interest rates in more than 2 decades, something like 23 years. And this has been going on since last July. So we're coming up on a year of that. So while this whole uptick in inflation that we've seen over the last couple of months, because it was coming down, but now it's going back up. And the reason it's going back up is quite simple. The more that they don't keep raising rates, right? I don't want them to raise rates, but they have to in order to get inflation under control. And the main thing they got to do is stop spending. And it's like, you saw the video. If you didn't, Google it and find it. It's very moving, and not in a good way. $95 billion in aid, and $61 billion of it was going to Ukraine. And it seemed like everybody in the House chamber, when they voted for this, was waving a small Ukrainian flag in the air. I've never understood that one. I really didn't get it. I understand that we're here to support, we're here to help, all sorts of things. Okay, got it. Listen, I'm the one that's pro helping Ukraine, right? Most people are like, get out of here. We don't need to be involved. I think we do need to be involved because we're the ones that said, hey, give up your nukes and we'll protect you. All that being said, a week ago, 10 days ago, whenever it was, when they had this vote and everybody's waving their small Ukrainian flag around, what was that all about? Really, what was that all about? I still don't get that. But as long as we continue to spend that way, it's over, right? There's no way to move forward because you're constantly behind the 8 ball. And again, this is not economics 101. This is balancing your own checkbook and running a home 101. Just because you can print your own money doesn't mean you are totally blind to how a checkbook works, how a budget works, right? The economist Milton Friedman once said, don't let them fool you. Every budget is balanced. Every budget. And I think it's one of the most brilliant things he'd ever said. And he said a lot of brilliant things. He said, every budget is balanced. You're either going to pay for it through tax, or you're going to pay for it through inflation because they're going to print more money. And that is God's honest truth. And that's where we are. So as long as that continues to happen, we don't move forward. And they're trying to make it move forward very slowly. Because again, their goal is not to fix the root of the problem, but to make it manageable right now. Because they're politicians. And politicians look at the short term. Right now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not your kids, not their futures. But right now, their next election in the House, every 2 years. In the Senate, every 6. And there's always a next election coming up because of the way that they stagger that stuff. And that's it. That's as simple as it gets. So now we have this jobs report. It's a little bit lighter, not as hot, a little slowed down from, more subdued, I should say, than what they were expecting. And the Fed, which is not raising interest rates. Because, and again, some people will receive that as, oh, thank God they're not raising interest rates. Yeah, but if you don't raise interest rates and inflation creeps back up, what are we doing? Right? Every economist I've had on this show says you've got to raise interest rates. You're going to have to slow down our economy in order to stop the spending, not in order, and stop the spending in order to bring down inflation. Yet, here we are. Here we are spending away, and spending away. I don't know how we get out of the problem. And I realize nobody wants to get out of the problem. They just need to get out of the problem today. They've got to get past the issue as it pertains to us today. That doesn't work because lots of industries are affected. And right now, as it stands, you've got the auto industry in some areas thriving and others no. Other than Tesla, most electric car manufacturers like Chevy and Ford and the rest of them, they're not even wanting to make electric vehicles. Very expensive to produce, and they're not selling like they did because Tesla seems to be the only game in town. And I think BMW now has a pretty competitive model that more people are getting. But long story short, that's where we're at. And you've got prices are up 3.5% from March a year ago. That's according to the latest CPI Consumer Price Index report, creeping further away from the Fed's goal. And as long as that continues, I say we're screwed. So I want to get a take on what's going on in that industry that I just mentioned, the auto industry, because people, mainly China, and again, remember, China has factories outside of China, right? They've got factories in Mexico, in Vietnam, in India. So when you see stuff that says made in Mexico, Vietnam, or India, it doesn't mean that it's not made in China. It means that it's made in a Chinese factory that they're operating there. And the auto industry is no different. And there's spying, slave labor, and all of that stuff is slowly killing U.S. markets, including the U.S. car market. So I want to get with that topic and you all and our next guest straight ahead. So stick with me, folks. It's Friday night. We're slowing down, but we're not done just yet. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Coming right back.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue. And I want to talk about the dark side of the Chinese auto industry and everything that entails. Spying, slave labor, killing the U.S. car market slowly. And to do that, I want to bring in one of my favorite guests, Gordon Chang, at Gordon G. Chang on Twitter and the rest of the social media. He's the author of China is Going to War and a number of outstanding books on China. Gordon Chang, welcome back, sir.
Thank you so much, Rich.
Always a pleasure, sir. So let's dig into this a little bit. I'm looking at a piece in Fox Business, and the headline, China expert, that's you, talks about the dark side of the Chinese auto industry. And this is, there's a dark side to everything that China gets involved in, lamentably. And I want to get your take on what exactly is going on with this.
Well, what China's doing is it has got automobile capacity, which is about 10 million more units than it can absorb locally. In China last year, the local market was 30,900,000 cars sold. But it's making 10 million more cars than that. And so it's got to sell in foreign markets. It's been dumping its cars. And by the way, China provides enormous subsidies for the production of cars, which means that essentially what China is doing is it is giving Chinese car makers an unbeatable advantage in global markets.
Now, we, the United States, Chevy, Ford, we're both producing electric vehicles and have slowed down both. I think Ford has completely stopped with their electric vehicles. And I'm not sure, Chevy, I know they'd slowed down. I'm not sure if they've completely stopped. But why aren't we doing the same thing? If we're producing more cars than we can sell here, why aren't we flooding the market and doing what China does?
Well, we should be doing that in a sense, but, the United States does not provide those subsidies. So, for instance, the subsidies that China provides to its car market are about 4 times greater than the average subsidies in OECD countries. That's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, basically developed economies. And so really you can see the magnitude of what China is doing. The United States could do that, but we don't. And we don't do it because we believe in fair trade. And really when you provide subsidies at that level, what you're doing is you're trying to drive out manufacturers in other countries. And the United States doesn't do that.
Wow. So basically they're rigging the system so that they can unload everything that they're overproducing and the rest of us are left behind. Why can't we be competitive like they are?
Well, we could be competitive if, for instance, we increase the tariffs on Chinese cars, and we should be doing that. Now, no Chinese-branded car is sold in the U.S., but Chinese-made cars are sold here. So, for instance, the Lincoln Nautilus, a Buick Envision, and some other cars are actually made in China and sold in the U.S., but under the nameplates of other companies.
Wow.
So we have, by the way, that's a list of cars not to buy. But, essentially what we have got is a market which we have allowed China to preserve its advantages that are really the result not of competitive strength, but really of government subsidies.
Unbelievable. Folks, we're on with Gordon Chang. Now, what I find interesting here, Gordon, is that this is a problem I didn't even know existed. It's one more feather in the cap of China on how they kind of screw everybody else over. Now, when it comes to... Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is what they did with steel about a little more than a decade ago, where they were just making steel well beyond the requirements of China. And again, they were doing it with subsidies. They destroyed steel industries in other countries. So this is a playbook that China has employed time and time again. And, we know what they're doing, and we have the means to stop it, because in order for the Chinese economy to succeed right now, it needs to over-export. And so it exports to our markets. We can keep that stuff out. And if we keep that stuff out, China's economic strategies are going to fail. So we have the power to stop this. So it's up to us, and it's a question of political will. Yeah,
well put. Now, Gordon Chang, I want to follow up on that with the steel part of it, because it's interesting that there was a lot of talk about Chinese steel a few years back, and that while they're not the our favorite go-to for steel, I think our favorite at the time was that I read the article was Canada, and of course U.S. steel, but those markets had softened and China became, more competitive, like you're saying, with doing whatever they do. But the actual product wasn't as superior as U.S. steel or even Canadian steel. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh, sure. The steel that China produces is not of the same quality that is available elsewhere. And that has had problems. So, for instance, when the Bay Bridge in San Francisco was rebuilt, there was Chinese steel, and some of that Chinese steel did not meet the specifications. That's sort of like the way China operates. And we see it with, for instance, all of the problems and collapses in China. They, part of it is because of substandard steel.
Folks, we're on with Gordon Chang. He's an expert on all things China and really Asia overall. Great on foreign policy and one of my favorite guests. Gordon Chang, I want you to stick with us. Make sure you follow him at Gordon G. Chang on X and whatever social media you can find him on. We're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Gordon Chang. And Gordon, I want to talk to you a little bit about these automakers. China, it seems from this article I'm looking at, has surpassed Tesla's production of electric vehicles by double, or at least for the second year in a row, by a bunch. And you've helped me understand why they're doing it, because they have these subsidies and they're basically crushing the market. But what I'm interested in knowing about is how competitive are the Chinese electric cars versus a Tesla globally? Is Tesla just something that's kind of catchy for Americans, or is this Chinese brand really something that people are looking for?
Oh, well, people buy BYDs, which is the leading right? Chinese car company, which stands for Build Your Dreams. BYD is now the number one car-selling brand in China, and it surpassed Tesla a year ago. Now Tesla's not even in second place. It's in third place. Now, a Tesla Model Y is the best-selling car in China, but the second, third, and fourth best-selling cars are BYDs. And, essentially BYD is a cheaper car. They sell more units. And so in a sense, they don't compete in the same segment of the market as a Tesla, but, they'll catch up because they've been doing very well. They've been gaining ground on Tesla. Now they've surpassed it, as I mentioned, in terms of being the number one car brand in China, and they'll probably do the same thing elsewhere.
BYD, yeah, looks like for the second straight year, like you mentioned, making more than 3 million electric vehicles, and Tesla made 1.84 million. And I just find it so interesting that you've got companies like Ford and others that are bailing out. Ford invented the car, and they're having trouble selling EVs, yet you've got China eating Tesla's lunch. It really sends a message to me that I think we're doing something wrong. It's not just China, cutting corners and giving subsidies, but I think Americans just aren't being as competitive. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Well, there are a couple things there. First of all, American consumers have turned their backs on the EVs, and for very good reason. They don't have range. They're inconvenient to fill up. It takes like a half an hour or so to get a full charge. Or if you go to a gas station, you pump gas yourself, you do it in about 2 minutes. So clearly, the EVs are not practical. And American consumers understand that. Now, in China, there is a big push to sell EVs, so that's not happening. But take a look at Europe, Rich, where you have basically the European ports. Their parking lots have become basically the dumping grounds for unsaleable Chinese EVs, which, after unloaded from the ship, are just left at the port. So clearly, European consumers who have been buying Chinese EVs, they buy them, but they're not overly enthralled with the whole notion themselves. So without real government support, EVs at this point really are not as practical as your gasoline-powered car. Give me a V4, give me a V8 any day of the week. Basically, that's what Americans are saying.
Yeah, I drive a V8 every day, and I can't imagine going any smaller. But you're right. Recently spent some time in Europe, and while I was there, I can't remember, honestly, seeing any electric cars. I might have seen one Tesla, but for the most part, they were very small, mostly, European brands, but occasionally a Ford, occasionally like a Prius or something like that. But for the most part, very, very small cars that were pretty much all gasoline. And it was just, I found it so interesting that, you come to the United States and there's charging stations everywhere. And when it gets really cold, you have stranded Teslas everywhere. And yet there's still this push, and China's selling them left and right. Anyway, Gordon Chang, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, even people who drive hybrids, they just sort of forget the batteries and they just use the gas, which is a real showing of where people, what people think about the EVs.
100%. Now, I wanted to switch gears to ask you about something that's a little bit different, which is related to the BRICS. I was talking about this earlier in my monologue, and I figured, who knows about that? Gordon Chang knows about that. And I think this is a very interesting thing to me, because I get this debate from both sides, right? Some people telling me, watch out, the dollar's about to go down, and BRICS is going to eat our lunch. And then I've got people telling me, it's great, but BRICS will never agree on a asset-backed cryptocurrency, which is what I think they're aiming for, to even compete with the dollar. So they'll never become the world's reserve currency. And I don't think we should traffic in absolutes, like never, but I think it's good to look at trends. And the trend I see is that there are less and less countries, just like me as a consumer, as a person, that has traveled to a few different places. And when I've been there, people happily, 10 years, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, people happily took dollars. That's not the case in many places anymore. They're not happily taking dollars. They'll happily take your card, but they want you to use their currency. And I don't know the real answer to that, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
There's only one country that can ruin the dollar, and that's not China, Russia, or any of the BRIC nations. That's the U.S., and that's by going into debt. But the BRICS currency is an idea which will not go anywhere. And maybe I'm being too absolute about it, but the problem is, in order to have a currency work, you have to have common financial management of the countries that use that currency. And the euro is a great example of countries that are very similar, but are having problems maintaining the euro because of their different financial policies. Yeah. The problem for BRICS is that you've got countries which are very, very different. You've got China and Russia being friends, but then you have India, which is a mortal enemy of China. And, you have failing nations like South Africa and Brazil, which is having problems of its own. Plus, they've now added 6 other countries to the BRICS group. So this is not something where they can actually maintain a common currency. This is going to be hard for them to do, and I don't think that they're going to accomplish it. China can force countries to take the renminbi, their currency, but even Chinese exporters don't want to hold on to renminbi. And the reason is it's a weak currency right now. It's being supported by China buying dollars in order to make sure that the renminbi doesn't collapse. But the renminbi has weakened substantially over the last couple of years. And if it were not for the support from Beijing, it would fail and it would just basically become a worthless currency in a very short period of time.
Gordon, what would stop the BRICS consortium from saying, all right, well, let's go with Russia then, with the whatever their currency is called, the ruble. With all the money they're making selling oil, why not just have them be the default currency?
Well, first of all, the problem with the ruble is that it's Russian, and Russia's involved in a war that many countries don't, really like. There are sanctions, and really nobody wants to take rubles, not even the Russians. So the ruble would not be one of the currencies. The renminbi is not convertible on the capital account, and as I mentioned, is a very weak currency right now, which is supported by China, but China doesn't have the resources to indefinitely support it. Then you're talking about a lot smaller countries, Brazil, South Africa, India, the rupee, maybe 30, 40 years from now, but not at the present moment. So you're dealing with currencies that don't really pose a challenge to the dollar. The challenges to the dollar would be, for instance, the euro, but the euros have been having problems. The yen is falling dramatically. When we were in Tokyo in October, it was 130 to the dollar. It fell below the 160 level about a week ago and now settled in at 156 or so because the Bank of Japan massively intervened. So you're talking about a lot of weak currencies. The dollar right now is extremely strong. It's, President Trump thinks it's too strong. But the point is, people will hold on to dollars right now because they're supported by the interest rates of the Fed. It's a strong currency. It's stable. And as the world looks less and less safe, people will generally rush into dollars anyway. So the dollar right now is actually a very, very robust-looking currency.
Gordon Chang, catch him at Gordon G. Chang on social media. And Gordon, stick with us. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with Gordon Chang. I had to twist his arm so he could stick with us because I wanted to continue talking about it. I went on a tangent on this brick stuff, but if anybody knows about that, Gordon Chang knows. And Gordon, there was this article that I wanted to speak about with you from a couple of days ago, and it's about the billions of dollars in U.S. investment that's going to Chinese firms that are linked to the Chinese Communist Party military and some specific human rights abuses. Tell us about it.
Well, unfortunately, despite all the sanctions that we have, for instance, on Chinese companies, Americans can't deal with a number of Chinese companies because of the Commerce Department's entity list rules. Nonetheless, we can invest in them, which is just insane.
Yeah.
And so Americans can invest in companies that are building weapons to kill Americans. And in addition to that, the federal government's thrift savings plan, which is like the 401k for federal employees, people can still, through the mutual fund window, invest in many Chinese companies that are on sanctions lists, which is just really wrong. And by the way, Rich, it's not just companies that are in defense businesses. It's also every Chinese company, because every Chinese company is required to hand over whatever they have to the military if the military so demands. That's Xi Jinping's doctrine of military-civil fusion. So we should be thinking of all Chinese companies as dangerous.
Gordon Chang, I want you to tell everybody how they can find you, the website, to keep in touch with all the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, I archive my articles for free on my website, which is www.gordonchang.com, and on Twitter or X at Gordon G. Chang.
Gordon Chang, always a pleasure to chat with you. Great seeing you earlier this week. My best to Lydia, and thank you for being here, sir. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot.
Well, thank you so much, Rich, as
You
are
bet.
you.
Amen. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. We continue with more discussion in hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday night edition of the program. It's hour number 2, and if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. And a couple of things that I've been looking at tonight are all of the crazy that's going on in the news, right? And there's always a fair degree of crazy that goes on in the news. A couple of the stories that we're keeping an eye on are Hope Hicks. Apparently, she's going to be taking the stand soon. They're going to try and get her to say incriminating things against Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, the 45th president of these United States, like they've tried every step of the way to get this guy. And they haven't given up yet. So we're going to see exactly how that turns out. I would suspect that nothing's really going to turn out, right? That's just how it typically goes. They make up a few things, and then that's it. Then we talked a little bit about the jobs report. We've talked about the malign influence that China has on the global economy and even on the American car market because of how they do things, as well as allowing Americans to invest in the Chinese military's defense contractors. And one would think that these are companies that we have sanctions on, and they are, but that's still allowed to happen. And some of what I want to talk about now is the climate change, right? We don't talk about that enough. And I saw this great clip of NBC News' Jane Pauley back in 1983, and it was juxtaposing what she was saying, again, on TV, on the news, on NBC News, back in 1983. And that's 41 years ago. And something that Bernie Sanders just recently said. And it was really eye-opening. Listen to this.
A federal report today predicted possible catastrophic warming of the Earth by the 1990s with a strong climate change.
What the scientists are telling us, we don't get our act together within the next 8 or 9 years. We're talking about cities all over the world, major cities going underwater.
There you go. That's Senator Bernard Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders saying that cities are going underwater. Now, again, Jane Pauley had the same climate alarmist message back in the 80s saying the same thing. This seems to be the same song. Yet, thankfully, we're not underwater. Now, we've seen a bunch of other things happen, quite a lot of calamity that I think they blame on climate change that likely, in my opinion, probably doesn't have anything to do with the climate. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Right now, I want to talk with former Congressman Jason Isaac. He's the founder and CEO of the American Energy Institute. Former member of the Texas House as well. And I want to discuss what is going on with Joe Biden's new climate regulations. Jason Isaac, welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be on, Rich. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's dig into this. First of all, what do you think? What's the first thing that goes through your mind when you hear Jane Pauley back in the 80s, 1983, basically saying the same thing without the hyperbole that Bernie Sanders is saying now?
Yeah, it's Chicken Little has been screaming the sky is falling for decades now. It's the same old message from the climate alarmists that are just trying to scare people into action so they can control every aspect of our lives. They want to scare you with a problem that they're making up and then tell you they've got the solution, which is just to separate you from your money. And that's really all it has been for decades now. And they've been really successful at scaring Americans, scaring people around the world, and taking our money and our freedoms away from us.
Yeah, you know, this is you put it so well, and it's so frank your explanation, but I feel like there's so many Americans that just aren't swayed by this, and I would suppose that that's in large part a lot of the work that you do at the American Energy Institute is just that, right? Just helping to disprove some of the climate alarmism that's out there.
No, we absolutely do, and we work even at the public school level. We're trying to get textbooks that tell kids the positive things about energy produced in this country, because we do produce it more responsibly than anywhere on the planet, and that energy is responsible for lifting billions of people out of poverty, and we've got another billion to go that don't have any access to electricity. And you talk about something that would be transformational in their lives. We're also world leaders in clean air, and we're number one when it comes to access to clean and safe drinking water. But you're right that overwhelmingly climate policies don't poll real high. People are more concerned about the economy. They're more concerned about the border. They don't poll real high, but boy, do they affect our pocketbooks. And when you ask people if they recognize that the climate is changing, and by and large, everybody says the climate is changing. It's been changing forever. And do you want to pay anything to try to stop the climate from changing? It's like trying to pay something to stop the earth from turning. It's not going to happen. Overwhelmingly, people say they don't want to pay anything. And what they're finding out is they already are, because of this overburdensome government that we see that's just impacting every aspect of our lives. But our electric bills are skyrocketing because of climate alarmist policies being implemented. And that increase in energy costs increase the cost of everything. And so I think people are starting to wake up around the world that these policies really don't do anything to mitigate a changing climate. They just increase the cost of everything.
You know, Jason Isaac, I think you're right. And what is it, in your opinion, that makes climate such a dandy or such a effective wedge issue that people that are somewhat apolitical, people that, you know, are just otherwise, I can't stand the Democrats, I can't stand the Republicans, I barely vote, but no, don't kill the polar bears. Like, well, how is it that they figured this out, that this is the magic heartstring for so many people?
Well, I think I think it does have to do with animals, and there are unfortunately some humans that care more about animals than they do humans. And that's unfortunate. Greenpeace captured this really well in the 70s with their Save the Whales campaign. But it's what's completely ironic is you look at the destruction that's being done to whales up and down the east coast of the United States, and I believe it's being caused by wind and wind surveys. They're just pulsating incredibly loud sound into the seabed floor to test the seabed floor to see if it'll hold concrete, hundreds and thousands of tons of concrete to hold up a coastal wind turbine that's just going to produce unreliable, expensive electricity. And that is damaging the whales. They're being beached. And Greenpeace is nowhere to be seen on this effort to save the whales now. The polar bears is another example.
Right.
You look,
famous video.
50 years ago, there was about 10,000 polar bears on the planet. Today, that number is over 40,000. So I love to talk about this in my talks around the country. And it's like mission accomplished. If this is the barometric measurement of climate catastrophe, then we've solved the problem, because what we've done with the polar bears. But no, it's unfortunate the left has just completely embraced this cult-like fascination with decarbonization. It all revolves around decarbonization. As I was tweeting out about an hour ago, letting people know that I was going to be on your show, I used an image. You are the carbon that they want to reduce.
This is another very interesting place, because I feel like we use carbon for everything, right? And plants use carbon
life forms,
right? Yeah. And I thought plants, like photosynthesis, was the whole idea of plants using the carbon dioxide. How did that become public enemy number one?
Well, I really do believe that they found out that this is the way, this is the Malthusian way to get rid of humans, is to control the carbon. And so they began this false premise that CO2 is impacting the temperature on the planet, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The warming of the planet is increasing CO2 emissions. It's not the other way around. That warming is being driven primarily by the sun. But they just thought, hey, here's a way that we can go in and control every aspect of our lives. It's 0.04% of our atmosphere, Rich. I mean, it is a trace gas. If we reduce CO2 in the atmosphere much lower than it already is, we're at the death line where plants won't grow. And so what's happening is man is contributing a little bit more CO2. By and large, most of it occurs naturally. We're seeing a greening of the planet, and this is a good thing. It's largely because we're coming out of an ice age. And there's that little aspect that people want to leave out, that we're actually surviving through an ice age right now. But it's just this trace gas. And I'm a carbon-based life form. I tell people I live a high-carbon lifestyle. I think the rest of the world should too. Those of us that
yeah, that's good.
yeah. I'm working on a high carbon cookbook. So, there's my teaser right now. It's low carb, high carbon. I love foods like avocados and beef and almonds. Those are all high carbon foods, and they're actually good for you as well. But now we digress. But it's the way to control every aspect of our lives and increase the cost of everything. But it is truly about we are the carbon that they want to eliminate. You look at greenhouses actually increase the CO2 emissions, in their greenhouses because the plants grow stronger and they use less water. So it's really a good thing that man is contributing just a small amount of CO2 emissions to the atmosphere. But I wish the rest of the world could get to experience the high carbon lifestyle that you and I do, because again, world leaders in clean air because of our economic prosperity, because we actually use energy.
Jason Isaac, stick with us. We're coming right back. Folks, our guest, Jason Isaac, is founder and CEO of the American Energy Institute, former congressman, and we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Jason Isaac and with you all, the callers. I want to take it to Houston, Texas, KYST, the 920 Patriot Talk. And let's check in with our friend Stephen. Stephen, go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the call, Rich. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I have 2 points I'd like to make. One is I think I heard Mr. Chang say something that I think I don't quite understand or don't agree with. I've been driving a Prius vehicle of hybrid since, I think, 2009. Now, don't mistake me for somebody who knows what he's talking about just because I'm driving that kind of car. But he made a comment about even people who are driving hybrids are not paying any attention to the battery. They're just using a gas engine. A true hybrid, you don't control that. I mean, your driving conditions, the way you drive it, how fast you accelerate, how you go down hills and stuff like that, that influences it. But the system itself is going to flip between the battery and the engine as it sees fit. And as an example, the vehicle I have right now, when it's in, it is called a Prius Prime. And so it's a combination of an EV and a hybrid.
Do you like the electric car?
Well, the electric portion of it, since it's not an electric car like the...
Do you like the electric portion?
Being sold. I do, but it doesn't give me much mileage, just about 20 miles on a charge. So if I just drive around
Well, thank you for your call, Stephen. We appreciate it. Now, Congressman, I think this is interesting, not the entire, technical breakdown of this gentleman's car, but more so that we have this big push for EVs, and that's starting to chill a little bit. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it is. You're starting to see support for electric vehicles wane, and hybrid technology is actually increasing in support. And you have finally the chairman of Toyota. You've got an automobile manufacturer that's not bending the knee to the federal government and is saying that consumers want things that actually work and provide range, and hybrids do that. And he's also saying that, for the components that go in all the batteries and the electric components for an electric vehicle, he could make 66 hybrid electric vehicles, which would reduce pollution, which would reduce, fuel use, so that makes it more efficient for the consumer. But the problem is, in research I published last year with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, shows that there's this illegal multiplier if you're an electric vehicle. So by being a pure electric vehicle, you get a multiplier credit if you get 65 miles per gallon. That's the rating that Teslas get. You actually multiply that times 6.67, so nearly 500 miles in credits per gallon, and then they sell those credits to other automobile manufacturers. For every electric vehicle sold, it's nearly $20,000 in subsidy that's being picked up by purchasers of internal combustion engine. Those gas and diesel vehicles are subsidizing electric vehicles to the tune of $20,000. And when you add up all the subsidies that electric ratepayers are paying, that the federal tax credit of $7,500, it's almost $50,000 per electric vehicle sold, and that's based on 2021 numbers. We're going to update the numbers here later this year, and you're going to see them increase even more. That electric ratepayers, gas car buyers, and taxpayers, we're all subsidizing wealthy individuals to buy electric vehicles when the market should be going hybrid, but because of policies put in place, it's just not happening. It's like our electric market. It would be going natural gas and coal because those are the cheapest forms of electric generation possible. Right. But the Biden administration is saying, no, we got to shut down coal. We've got to, and they're going to force the closure of all of the coal, which produced 16% of our electricity last year, gone with this new EPA rule. And already crushing with higher interest or higher cost for electricity, just crushing the least among us.
What are your thoughts on this Biden rule that's crushing us? Do you think it's something that gets rolled back? Should we get a new president, or is it here to stay? Is there a way around it?
There is, and we were successful in suing in West Virginia. Their attorney general is really leading the charge against the Clean Power Plan from the Obama administration. That was overturned. Trump ruled out a plan that was repealed with the new administration. And so we really do need a new administration to come in early next year and get this off the books. But the problem is you have the utilities. These utilities, you look who's their biggest investors. It's companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, who are forcing companies to comply with a climate alarmist agenda. They're part of a cartel. You see BlackRock's invested in 30 companies in China that are on the boycott list here in the United States because they're state-sponsored. I mean, this is a terrible thing. They're taking American pension dollars and weaponizing them against American energy producers. They're taking those pension dollars and putting them into Chinese companies that clearly don't have the best interests of the United States at heart. And so these utilities are going to continue to embrace decarbonization because they know they can pass the cost on to ratepayers in the form of higher rates, and that's how they recoup their costs. They know it's more expensive. It's absolutely egregious, but you're looking at a year-over-year increased cost of electricity every year. That's why between 2021 and 2022, there was a 30% increase in consumers getting their electricity disconnected because they can't afford it, Rich. I mean, this is what's happening. You've got 5 million people between 21 and 2022 that lost access to a primary utility, either electricity or natural gas.
Jason Isaac, we're going to pause right there to let everybody know how they could find you. AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. Give them your social media handle as well.
You can find me at Isaac for Energy on X. Isaac for Energy, all spelled out.
Sir, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you for leading the fight on energy for all of us. I appreciate it.
Embrace the high carbon lifestyle. Thanks for having me on, Rich.
You bet. Thanks, Congressman. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls are coming up now.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue the conversation and your calls as well. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And President Trump, of course, he's the big story every day, right, as we're going into this election year. And what's really interesting is a lot of people are weighing in on him and his gag order and going to jail and really like going above and beyond, going the real extra mile to really stop this man from running for president. You know, the system that we have was always designed, the Electoral College, by its design, was designed in part to prevent these tyrannies, right? Tyranny of the majority. And that's how our system is designed. So if that is already built in, what is all this alarmism? What is all this? We have to arrest this man for talking. Really, I've just never heard of such a thing. These ideas, last I heard, came from guys like Stalin, folks like Fidel Castro, people that were dictators that were afraid of you saying something that opposed them, would send the police to you to lock you up, to shut you up. And I mean, they're literally doing that to Donald Trump. I think that's crazy. Because you don't like what he says about whatever he says. I just remarkable. Anyway, George Conway, he was once married, and maybe still married, but he was married to Kellyanne Conway. And when she was on this program last year, I think she said they were getting divorced. Again, their marital situation's not really my concern. But I just think that that's the case. And he was on MSNBC yesterday, and he says a judge should impose fines for the gag order and tell Trump, this is it, you're going to jail after this. Listen to this.
I think what the judge has to do is impose some more fines of $2,000 or $3,000 or three or four of these, and then say, this is it. This is it. You'll go to jail. This is it. Now we've gone through this twice. The next time they come back and it's anything similar to what I've hit you for with these fines, I'm going to take, you're going to spend an hour on a bus going up to Rikers.
Well, Rikers in the Bronx, I don't think it's an hour away from Manhattan, number one. But number two, even maybe there's traffic. The real question here is, should Donald Trump go to jail for saying things like the judge has taken away his constitutional right? Because that's what he said. Cut 11. Listen to this.
No, he won't stop me from testifying. The gag order is not to testify. The gag order stops me from talking about people and responding when they say things about me. We have people saying things about me, and I'm not allowed to respond. So this judge is taking away my constitutional right. And as the Republican candidate and somebody that's leading Biden by a lot, I should be able to respond. But this guy's got me with a gag order. Now, we're filing, I think today, a constitutional motion to get this out. We'll be filing a lawsuit on the constitutionality of it. But if somebody says something about me and I'm not allowed to respond, that's never happened before.
So there you have it. You've got George Conway, who I'm going to say, of course, he represents Republicans that hate Trump, known as the Lincoln Project. And he says, throw away the key. He's on MSNBC with Jen Circleback Psaki, Silent P, of course. And they're saying, lock him up, lock him up, lock him up. Like he said about Hillary Clinton, right? So Trump says the judge is coming after him because they're all talking smack about him and he can't defend himself. And I agree with that. If you're going to talk smack, I'm going to talk smack too, right? That's how we do it here. Anyway, the question is, should Donald Trump, Donaldus Magnus, El Trompito, the 45th president of these United States, should he be imprisoned for speaking his mind about this trial? Not witness intimidation, not anything other than speaking his mind, and more importantly, running for president of the United States. Let's hit the phones. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Louisville, Ohio, WEOL, and check in with Richard. Richard, do you think that Trump should be arrested for talking?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Are you still there? Pardon?
Why not? Why should he remain free for speaking his mind?
because you're supposed to be able to defend yourself, either physically or verbally, depending what you're being exposed to. They're taking it away from him solely for the purpose of pumping up Biden, et cetera, because they know he got 74 million votes last time. And I know this time he's probably going to get 150 to 200 million or million votes.
Million, yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I love your optimism, Richard. I really do. And I agree with you. I think he should be able to say what he's got to say. I haven't ever heard him talk about a witness per se. I don't think he's said anything about jurors. I think there was one statement he grumbled something like, oh, she's a Trump hater or something, whatever it was. And again, I'm making that up. I'm ad-libbing. I have no idea what he said. They just said he grumbled under his breath, and right away they were on top of him for saying stuff. The guy can't catch a break. But I think you're right, 100% right. If somebody's going to talk smack about you, you're going to talk smack back. Somebody's going to punch you in the face. What do? You're going to punch him in the face back. That's just how life works. And the idea that the judge is going to say, look, we're not going to let you talk about my daughter, who consequently is raising a ton of cash because she's a Democrat Party fundraiser, in particular based on this trial. And to suggest that the judge doesn't have a conflict of interest because his daughter has a financial stake in this case that he's presiding over, I think is wrong. And how hard would it have been for him to say, you're right, I don't want to create the appearance of an impropriety. I'm going to give this to my most closest friend who is the biggest left-wing activist I know, but doesn't have a daughter that works with Democrat candidates for political office. And that's it. I think that's really all that he would have had to do. You could have kept it with another left-wing judge if that was really their concern. Again, that wouldn't have been fair per se, but it would have been more fair than allowing this judge to say, nope, you can't talk about my daughter, but she could talk about you, right? And I think that's the part that's unfair, Richard. Now, I think you also wanted to make a comment about interest being tax deductible. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I think it was I thought it was in the 70s, but I talked to your earlier gentleman. He said it was in the 80s. That if you had credit card debt and you paid interest on it, you could deduct that on your taxes at the end of the year. So for years, I would use my credit card when we fell short, take my tax return, put it down on the credit card, never had a large credit card debt. Now we're hearing that people are going paycheck to paycheck, using a credit card just to live and survive. They took that away in 85, 83, 86, something like that. That needs to come back so that those people can use that not to promote using the credit card, but to give them a warning when you get back to them. If you misuse this, we'll take it away again, Well,
listen, no, I'm with you. Listen, mortgage interest is tax deductible. I'm with you. I think interest on everything should be tax deductible because you're already paying tax on the earnings. So come on, stop trying to get people on the way in and on the way out. I agree with you 100%. That should be the case. Listen, I am as anti-tax as they come. People are like, don't you like paved roads? Not that much. I don't. I love the police, but if you told me I could opt out, I would. I would opt out of paved roads. I would opt out of police. I'm sorry, call me a radical. Give me a dirt road. I'll get myself a horse or a 4x4. I already have a 4x4, and a couple of guns, and I'll call it a day. I'm probably that way because of too much government, because of a government run amok. If there was some balance to this and it didn't burden people so much to pay their taxes, I probably wouldn't be so anti-tax. But that's where we are. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick pause right here. We're going to come back to the rest of your calls and more. We got calls from Florida, Georgia. Where is the West Coast? Where is New York? Where is the rest of the East Coast? Let's go. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. brown. He's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, again, we continue with some of the audio clips that we have from earlier today. President Trump outside of the New York courtroom this morning, where he says this trial is a disgrace.
If we had a fair trial, if we had a fair judge, I don't think he would have even allowed this trial to take place. Then I would go and read the newspaper stories today, the legal experts, because they've come out with scathing reports on this trial, scathing, that it shouldn't even be taking place. Read Greg Jarrett, read Andrew McCarthy, read Mark Levin, who's been so great, read all of them. That's incredible. Dershowitz came out with a very strong article. Jonathan Turley has been very, very powerful. Just came out with another article. Just read them. I don't know these people for the most part. These are legal experts, and they say this trial is a disgrace.
That is President Trump citing legal scholars that indicate that this is a fake, phony, fraud trial being brought sheerly for political purposes. And I think he and they are all correct. I think many people agree, including the vast majority of Americans, which is why he continues to excel in polls. You've got a guy that's in court almost, it's like a part-time job, almost a full-time job. You know, every day he gives a press conference outside of, think of that, he's running for president outside of a courtroom. That's how it's been for the last couple of months. And he's still leading in the polls. I find it remarkable. They'll try and sell him short on that because that's what they do, right? You've got Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro compares Trump to Hitler. He compares him to Mussolini. He says that if Trump is reelected, our democracy is at risk. This is something they talk about all the time. Cut 14, listen to this.
Do you think our democracy is at risk in this election?
I think that it is. I always keep saying democracy is great, of course, but democracy people take for granted. It's a word that some people don't even understand. They take it for granted. It's about right and wrong, period. The guy's a monster. It's beyond wrong. It's almost like he wants to do the most horrible things that he can.
It's almost like De Niro doesn't understand what democracy
means. Out of us, I don't know what it is, but he's been doing it, and it's scary.
Listen, I like Robert De Niro's acting. I enjoy his films. I am not that guy that's going to say, I'm never watching another Robert De Niro movie again. He sucks because he doesn't like Trump. Nope, not doing it. I like De Niro. I enjoy his films. I've never watched a Robert De Niro movie because I liked his politics, because I liked his personality. It's one thing I like, how he's acting in that movie. It entertains me, and I'm going to watch it. But I will say, when you make these statements that where you're not acting and you're being the real you, what a pendejo, right? He says democracy is about one thing, right and wrong. That's totally wrong. No. Democracy is about the majority vote, right? Majority rule. We don't have that here. We specifically have a constitutional republic because the founders wanted to avoid the tyranny of the majority. So when he says, I think some people don't really know what that means, I think he doesn't know what that means. And I wish there was space here for me to say, well, maybe that's my interpretation of it. Maybe there's a different way of looking at it. What other way could there be when they specifically talk about the tyranny of the majority? Really? But this is what they want to do. So Trump says that the trial is an absolute disgrace. I think he's right. De Niro says that this guy's got to get out because it's bleeping scary. What's scary is that we've got Hollywood people telling us what to do with our vote and don't even know the meaning of democracy. Let's go to your calls. John, Vero Beach, Florida, WTTB. John, go right ahead.
Especially tonight, Rich. This is an absolute pleasure to be on your show. And
thank you.
I really believe this is the time, yes, for us real, true Americans to stand up. And maybe from a red state like Florida, we get a district attorney and investigators, and we bring charges against that judge out of his jurisdiction and make him feel the heat and bring charges against him for malfeasance and for collusion and for tyranny from the bench. We need an organization maybe called Republicans for real judicial constitutional justice and honesty.
Well, you just made yourself president. I wish you a lot of good luck in recruiting for it, but I think you're right. And honestly, I think this is a judge in the New York State Supreme Court, so he's not really subject to federal scrutiny, if you will. But you've had the excellent men and women in Congress on the House Judiciary Committee. They've done, I think, everything they can do to put federal oversight onto a lot of these things and shed a light on it where they can. And I think they've been somewhat effective in, raising awareness and whatnot. They don't have any prosecutorial authority or anything like that. But we've seen them make some moves on that. And I think that's a good thing. And they can make referrals to the Department of Justice for whatever. But ultimately, this boils down to Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. And I don't see Joe El Baboso Biden or Merrick Garland making any moves that are going to benefit Trump, right? Or even benefit the American people, because we all stand to be in the same shoes as Trump eventually. So I wish that were the case, and I hope that there's a way around that. But for now, it seems like he can only fight his case there and then bring it to, the Supreme Court like he did with the other case, where I think ultimately he's going to prevail, in my humble opinion. John, Vero Beach, Florida, WTTB, thanks for the call. Have a great Cinco de Mayo weekend. Folks are coming right back with your calls and more.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Speed round, and we're going to get back to your calls again in the next segment at the top of the next hour, so stick with us. 833-482-5337, 833-4VALDEZ. And we're going to go to Atlanta, Georgia. WGKA. Very quickly. Steve, go right ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. So I think you could have explained it a little better. The electoral college vote.
Is this about the jurors being sequestered or about the electoral college?
Both.
You don't have enough time for both. Choose wisely.
Oh, can I do it on the next one?
You're going to get cut off. Be smart.
Okay. So the electoral vote is an exact replication of the Senate and the House. So you get 2 electoral votes for every senator you have. You get 1 vote for every representative you have. So it's an exact replication, but straight up vote, more like a democracy, if you will, for the electors. And that's the point of that.
But that's wrong, because you that's why we constantly have people winning what they call the popular vote, and it doesn't win them the presidency. What wins them the presidency is the electoral vote, right? The electoral vote, that's what counts, and that can be less than the popular vote or the democratic vote, small d. Steve, thanks for your call. Folks, we're coming right back with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday edition of the program, hour number 3. We like to call it Open Phone America. And that's where it's open phones across America. You get to call in and state your case on whatever you want to talk about. We'll take your call on that. If you're a first-time caller, you move to the front of the list. If you disagree with me, you move to the front of the list. And regulars, of course, are always welcome. Looking forward to speaking with our friends on the East Coast and the West Coast. Always have great representation from everybody in the middle of the country. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And one of the big stories today was the jobs report. It was a little bit less than was expected. Only 175,000 jobs were added in April, falling short of the expectation of, I think it was 240,000 jobs and a 3.8% unemployment rate. That also came off target at 3.9% in April, according to the Department of Labor. So that's where we're at with that. Plus, the Federal Reserve Committee voted to hold off on cutting interest rates, which have set a range of 5.25% to 5.5%. And that's actually the highest rate that we've seen in 23 years, according to The Hill. And this has been going on since last July. Now, in other news, President Trump was in court yet again, and of course, making comments outside of the courthouse. And one of the comments he made was that this is purely about the Department of Justice and his political opponents coming after him to silence him. Listen to this.
Take a look at what's happened for years. The Democrats, the radical left, they've been after us for years, and they've destroyed people's lives. They've gone out and hired lawyers. They've been with lawyers for years, being sucked dry. And it's a shame. It's a shame what they've done to this country.
And it is a shame what they've done, but it doesn't change what they've done. And what they've done is, when they don't like what they hear, they come after you. And we've seen it happen a number of times. And that doesn't mean every time somebody gets indicted for something that it's a political motivation behind it and that it's some sort of witch hunt. No, not necessarily in any way. However, it tends to seem that way from time to time, especially when they go after Democrats. Like, I've never seen them go after a Democrat that is on board with climate change, on board with the border, on board with being pro-Iran. When they go after Democrats, even guys like Gold Bar Bob is anti-Iran. He never plays ball when it comes to Iran, right? Because he's Cuban and he understands the threat of despotism and communism and dictatorship. And he just doesn't want to get down with Iran, and good for him on that. Gold Bar Bob, kudos to you. And there was always speculation that it was because of his opposition to Obama's JCPOA that they went after him back then. And then he didn't get in trouble, ultimately beat that. But here he is again, in trouble again. I'm not saying he's an angel or a saint. I'm saying they're probably all guilty of sin. But why did he get in trouble? Likely because he challenged the status quo, the administration, and what they want to do. And it comes as no surprise to me that Henry Cuellar, Democrat congressman who's been very vocal about shutting the border, closing it down because he's in a border county, and voila, doesn't want to lose everything he's got. And interestingly enough, he was also indicted today. Now, again, I'm not saying he didn't take the bribes they're accusing him of. I'm saying these guys are probably all taking bribes. What made them so sure Henry Cuellar was doing it? At least that's my thought. I could be wrong. I'm a cynic. What do you want me to do? But I want you to listen to the report about Henry Cuellar.
Henry Cuellar maintained his innocence after the raid. He is the former chair of the House Azerbaijan caucus. And just last month, Cuellar's attorney said he was not the target of an investigation. Now, in a statement, Cuellar says he sought legal advice from the House Ethics Committee. He says, quote, "The actions I took in Congress were consistent with the actions of many of my colleagues." Cuellar has always cooperated in the probe. Cuellar is running for re-election in a massive district. It runs from San Antonio to the border. He said today he's not dropping out. 2 Republicans are in a runoff later this month. That will determine Cuellar's opponent this fall.
So that's Chad Pergram with Fox News. And I wanted to say, again, I think Cuellar is right? And I'm not saying he's right in taking bribes. Listen to what he said. What he's done is consistent with what most of his colleagues have done. It's what I just said. He's probably taking bribes just like they all are. He's just getting in trouble for it. Likely because he's not on board with Biden's policies at the border. And he's been vocal about it. That's the way they play the game in the swamp. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Anyway, we continue with your calls and more coming up. Let's go to Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Check in with Frank. Frank, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, Rich, and happy birthday for May 5th.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my Cinco de Mayo birthday is coming up, and I'll be celebrating all weekend long, and I thank you for that, Frank. If you were a little closer to New York, I'd be celebrating with you.
Yeah. Hey, also, it is the Orthodox Easter, where other parts of the world celebrate it on May 5th as well as in Ukraine and Russia as well. So it'd be nice if we had one Easter for the whole world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are you going to do, right? It's part of the whole liberty thing where you let people do what they want to do. I'm with you. I only celebrate one. I guess you get to pick and choose which one you want to celebrate. I do the one that comes after that lunar whatever it is and happens, on a different day every year. But what are you going to do? Now, let me ask you, what do you think about what's going on with this Trump stuff? He's forced to do his campaign through, stand-up comments that he makes outside the courthouse every day. In effect, he's making the best of it. Last week or 2 weeks ago, he visited a bodega after leaving court and made that into a campaign stop. Today or yesterday, I think it was yesterday, he stopped by the firehouse and, brought some pizzas for the firemen and, was a photo op and a campaign stop. And they seemed very genuinely happy to meet President Trump. And I think it's great that he's actually campaigning, despite being stuck in New York. And, whether it's to much avail or not, he's doing it. And I don't see Biden doing it.
That's true. I commend him on that. I think he has a lot of support. He will be our next president, and just have to give it up for him. All right.
Well, thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. What are your thoughts, though, on this whole the whole court thing? Do you think it's smoke and mirrors? It's a witch hunt, or do you think there's validity to this? That we should really be, whether Democrat or Republican, we should be holding a trial for somebody that's running for president?
Well, I think it's smoke and mirrors. A lot of like fake wrestling, things like that. It's all
right, like WWE.
We just have to get used to it.
Yeah, it's a sad truth. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. And thanks for your well wishes on my birthday. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 5337 833 4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Do you think Joe Biden's the right guy?
We don't have a choice. And I think he is the right guy. He's a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing. We don't have a choice. And I say that in a very positive, good way.
Then what would be your message to President Biden?
Keep up the fight. Keep at him. Go at him hard. And every chance you get, go at him. Go at him. Because people, they take notice of that stuff. And he's not afraid, but he's doing what he should do. He knows that. That's the only way. I use figuratively when I say punch him in the face. Go at him. A bully, you punch in the face. The trouble with Trump is he's not just a bully. He's a stupid bully.
I would love to have a chat with Robert De Niro. I really would. Just to get there. What makes Trump a stupid bully? Right? I mean, really. It's just amazing how disparate people's views can be, right? At this point of the game, where we've got inflation where it is, come on, man, I got hairy legs. You ain't black, right? Biden has proven himself to be bad on so many levels, and yet you still have people that are like, no, but Trump. No, but Trump. Unbelievable. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on some of this stuff. Eduardo is next up in line. Tampa, Florida, listening online, richvaldez.com. Eduardo, welcome.
Hey, Rich. Well, I'd rather see Halle Berry discussing menopause in front of the Capitol. That's a bit more interesting than Robert De Niro.
Isn't that crazy, the stuff he comes up with?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, happy birthday. My birthday's on May 11th.
Oh, well, there you go. Look at that. Yeah, May's a great time to have a birthday.
Yeah. Let me get into these comments because you got a bunch of calls here. The 175 job numbers here. So President Biden wants to add 11 states here, 44% capital gains tax. We got 100,000 Obamacare illegals. They're going to be getting health care. It takes 120 on the salary for first-time buyers. People are going into their 401ks and they're late on their loan payments.
Right. And they're living off credit cards.
Alert, at least. Yeah, we're in yellow. We're not in green.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, listen, I'm talking to everybody I know, right? In New Jersey, this is a great place to own some property. You live here, you could buy something if you've been in it long enough, and you're going to make money. And I was talking to a nice couple I was just out with earlier, and the wife is telling my girlfriend and I about they bought the place for $422,000, I don't know, something like 18 months ago or 2 years ago. And it's recently been appraised for something like almost $700K. And that's fantastic. The problem is their mortgage interest rate now is 2.2%. And should they sell and make this money and pay off their note, where do they go? Because they don't have a 2.2% mortgage anymore, right? If at best, they're going to get a 5.5% or a 6%. And if it's not at best, it's more like 6.5% or 7% or 7.5%. And if that's the case, and if let's say the bank wants to make 2 points on a 5.5 or on 5.25, then there you go. You've got 7.25, 7.5. How do you make money there, right? Especially just because you made some equity, it doesn't make sense for people to sell. They don't have anywhere to land, and for many, it makes just about as much sense to keep their money in a CD rather than sell, because you could probably make more money because interest rates are up in the bank. And make money in a CD on a 9-month or a year or whatever CD you sign up for. So I look at that and I think, man, it's tough to go anywhere. And when you look at what's going on here, like you said, we're not in the green. Maybe you're generous, I think, saying in the yellow. I think we're in the red. Eduardo.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
okay,
really
Rich.
Such a shame.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, brother, and enjoy that Florida weather for me. Happy birthday to you too. Let's continue. Let us continue with Sarah, Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Sarah, go right ahead.
Well, I just want to say you got great call screeners, but my main point is you played a clip, and I just played it. I heard the clips. I'm not quite sure what it was saying because I just got home about some guy talking about how Joe Biden should take on Trump and be like a boxer and punch.
That some guy is Robert De Niro, the raging bull himself.
Raging Bull. Oh, boy, he's living his little Raging Bull memories. Okay, so he's going to turn Joe Biden into Raging Bull. But we all know that it's a metaphor, right? And yet, when Trump talks about things being a bloodbath, suddenly he's threatening and a terrorist and, threatening violence. They're metaphors. And
right, when he says fight like hell, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's okay for the left to use metaphors, and we're all supposed to be like, yeah, those are just metaphors. He's not really going to punch Trump, And yet when Trump uses metaphors that have to do with any kind of fighting,
right?
And
mind you, the guy that he's talking about, right? They're talking about Biden, and Biden himself said, "I'd like to take him behind the bleachers and punch him in the nose."
Oh boy, I don't think Biden would come out walking. We know who'd win that one.
I always think about that. I go, Biden's going to shuffle his way there, take a swing at the invisible Easter bunny. Yeah, it's just not going to work out well for him.
He'll forget by the time he gets to the back of the bleachers. He'll forget what he was doing and come talk to people and stuff. So it wouldn't even be a fight.
Yeah, that's true. So that's funny. You didn't know it was Robert De Niro. Yeah, it's such a shame. And I'm not one to boycott people because they're idiots. Because I'm from New York and I've been surrounded by people like that my whole life that see things so differently than I do. And I always say I would never have gone on any dates. Hard to find conservative women in New York. They exist, but there's not a ton of them. And you'd be on your own if that were the case. But it's such a sad thing to see De Niro, such a good actor, and such a bad political philosophy that he has to himself. What are you going to do? Now, Sarah, what do you think about the jobs report coming in under expectation?
I missed that one. Is it that there's not enough jobs?
Yeah, well, they were expecting 240,000 jobs, and they ended up with 175,000 jobs. And obviously, whenever that happens, whenever they have a target and they miss the target, it's never good because it takes a couple of days to recover because the markets react to that. And then they're like, I don't know. People start lending less. Everybody, kind of contracts a little bit. And it's never a good look.
No, it isn't. But people really need to look at long-term trends. I really do. I mean, if the Democrats keep running the country, for example, we know that spending is going to go way up. We're going to have more crime. We're going to have open borders. The social services will eventually fail because you can't invite the world in and support them. You have to have taxpayers. And I don't care, even if every one of those immigrants were hardworking, which there some are and some aren't. But you break country's law to get in, that's a bad start in line. But the point is that it takes time for someone to land on their feet. And so somebody has to pay for the social services. And we're inundating too many people. It's like if you had 50 kids, you wouldn't be able to feed them,
Yeah, right. So, wow, 50 kids. that was a scary thought for a moment. I had 2, and I was like, man, that was tough. Yeah, I think you're right, Sarah. Anyway, Sarah, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. And you're 100% right. Trump is a metaphor. They really are talking about us. And I say that not to be hyperbolic, Sarah. I say it to be honest. I really do believe if they're doing it to Trump, they're obviously going to do it to you and me in a heartbeat. Because they probably think once or twice going, this guy's a former president. This guy's got billions of dollars at his disposal. All right, let's do it anyway, right? You and me, they're like, no thought at all. Go for it. Take them out at the knees. Sarah, thanks for your call. Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Folks, the music means we're coming right back with the second half hour of Open Phone America. We're going to go to Ohio, Idaho, Connecticut, and more. The number's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know her as AOC, all out crazy. She says that roads and bridges and communities were designed to be racist, and there is a psychic weight to all of this. Listen to this.
There is a psychic weight to living in communities that are designed to be disconnected. It affects your social life. My neighborhood that I'm from in the Bronx and Parkchester, we have some of the longest commutes in all of New York City.
Now, before we go on regarding the longest commute in New York City, what is a psychic wait? What is it? Does she mean a psychological wait? Like something that's mentally taxing? Or is it like Miss Cleo, like a psychic, crystal ball, and having weight to that? I don't know. Anyway, she says that living in Parkchester in the Bronx is one of the longest commutes in all of New York City. Listen to this.
It is a commute not just to work. It is a commute to do anything. It is a commute to connect socially. It is a commute to connect spiritually.
All right, hold it right there. So she's saying there's no churches? No churches in Parkchester? There's no churches in the Bronx? Is she saying that you have to commute to connect socially? There's no bars in that area? There's no restaurants? There's no bingo halls? Come on. I mean, the things that she's saying are absolutely insane to me. Insane. If you live far away from where you work, you can't just say that your community's racist because it's far away from where you work. Now, I understand the argument that at one point in time, they made certain neighborhoods in certain places away from the places where white people worked, back in the days when they made redlining and all of that. And I understand some of those neighborhoods still exist, but by and large, we don't do that anymore. And it's been a long time since that's happened. So I don't believe that everything that she's saying has its roots in the truth, if you will. Go ahead.
Decisions are designed to disconnect, disempower, and isolate people. And when you layer that with a lot of Robert Moses's racist intent, to very much do so to a very specific kind of people, Black, brown, low income, poor, etc. You can really see how it actually builds in organizing challenges to communities who actually want to empower themselves.
It fascinates me how people see things. Let me just give you a dose of reality, or what I'm going to call, what should be called common sense. Maybe it's called logic. I don't know. But she conflates a bunch of things here in the last part of this statement. Right? She says when you layer that with Robert Moses's racist intent to very much blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. To do this to very specific people, Black, brown. If she would have stopped there, I would have said, all right, maybe. But when she throws in low income, poor, etc., hold on a second. If I'm poor, I know that I can't live in Alpine, New Jersey, where I think the median home price is like $7 million. Is that fair? Yeah, of course that's fair. If you don't have the money to live in a specific neighborhood, you're going to live in a different neighborhood, one you can afford to live in. That's pretty basic, right? Or you get the smallest place in the nicest neighborhood, right? Or the biggest house in the mediocre neighborhood, right? You start to make choices and you pick and choose and you figure out what you're going to do. But to make this case that because she lived in the Bronx, now if you're going from the Bronx to Brooklyn, guess what? That's a heck of a hike. But nobody's saying you have to do that, right? You can go from the Bronx to the Bronx, from the Bronx to Queens, from the Bronx to Manhattan, uptown Manhattan versus downtown Manhattan. I mean, all of this to me is bizarre that she really delves this deeply into this. Now, I understand that there's truth in some of this. There were people that were racist. It was very commonplace to be racist. Segregation was once a thing, not that long ago, but long enough ago to know that it doesn't exist. And there's also the reality of people like living with people that they like. And that's just a reality. Many immigrant groups, and I'm just going to use them because they're common. For example, I don't know, New York City, Manhattan, you go to Chinatown. There's a lot of Chinese there. Okay, I think that's fair. I don't think it's racist. I used to live in Nutley, New Jersey, very Italian area. I don't think it's racist that a bunch of Italians live there. I don't know. Can I go on? So many different areas that have a particular people group I don't believe this is racist, and oftentimes it's by design by the people that are living there. They want to live with people that have the same customs as them, and it's easier for them to grow up. I grew up in a very Hispanic area. I came up in New York, but we moved to Jersey, and when I moved to Jersey, Hudson County, New Jersey is largely Hispanic. West New York, Union City, all of that area, largely Hispanic. In many ways, English is not necessary, right? You can survive on Spanish alone. You really could. So when you look at that, I don't think that's racist. There happens to not be a lot of people in the two, a lot of Asians, a lot of black people, that they just aren't there. I don't think anybody's keeping them out. I think they just don't gravitate to places like Union City and West New York. I don't think that's wrong in any way. Now, there's a neighborhood not far from me in Bergen County, Palisades Park, lots of Koreans. Is that racist? I don't think so. They like that area. They get together. They congregate. They get churches in the area. I honestly, I just look at this stuff so differently than AOC. And when you try to make it look like this psychic weight, and I say that to, be tongue-in-cheek and make fun of her, but the reality is a psychic weight to living in a community that is designed to be disconnected. This, to me, sounds like a poor pitch for these 15-minute cities that they've been proposing for the last couple of years. And they're building one here in Bergen County, not far from my home, where they're going to build a whole, 1,000, 1,500 apartments around the Garden State Plaza so that people can, and they're going to put a park there so you can walk and run and play and have a green space and live and go to school and shop all right there, where you don't have to commute anywhere, where you don't have to use any carbon, you don't have to get on a bus, you don't have to own a car. And to me, the queen of the Green New Deal seems like she's trying to make it sound like living in the Bronx was incredibly racist because the train ride was an hour from the Bronx to the World Trade Center. Oh, excuse me, AOC, all out crazy. But I think that's nuts. I think that's all out crazy. And I think this is really a push to get people to live in these 15-minute cities. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. You let me know. We're going to get to your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, we continue with your calls. I just want to give you a quick rundown, some of the stuff I wanted to get to tonight. Just crazy stuff. We talked about Henry Cuellar. He's been indicted by the Department of Justice for taking bribes from Azerbaijan. Biden is now opening up the Obamacare marketplace to recipients of the Deferred Access Childhood Arrivals. I think that's what DACA stands for. If I said it wrong, forgive me. Also, editorial note. Earlier I said BRICS was South America. Saudi Arabia. I meant South America. I misspoke on that one. And the Houthis in Iran are offering college education to any U.S. student that's been suspended for their role in anti-Israel protests. I hope all of these crazies go to Iran, and I wish them well. I have a feeling they'll be stoned to death by their new Iranian colleagues. And let's see, not by the colleagues, really by the mullahs. Let's see. Wisconsin teacher was arrested for making out with a fifth grader. Ay, bendito. Ice cream shop worker was fired for accepting a $100 tip from a customer. What is this world coming to? Biden gave out 19 Medal of Freedom awards And Luke Skywalker, or at least the actor Mark Hamill, made a surprise appearance at the White House press briefing room today. And this report comes out every now and again. And that's probably why AOC was talking about this long commute from the Bronx. There's a study that is linking gas stoves to childhood asthma. It's funny how we've been using gas stoves, I don't know, as long as we've had stoves, right? And gas. I mean, yeah, there was a time when you probably used a wood-burning stove, but I think gas stoves have been around for a long time. And, of course, somebody's going to say, and so has childhood asthma, Rich. What's your point? And my point is I think these studies are somewhat inconclusive. It seems like they never compare this stuff to folks in the Midwest. They always pick the bluest city, and they go, oh, yeah, this is everyone here. They're doing terribly because of the Green New Deal. You got to get rid of this and got to get rid of that. I don't buy it. Anyway, I just wanted to mention some of those before I get back to your calls. Due to speed around here, let us go. Where do we go here? Gary, Ridgefield, Connecticut, WLAD. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mr. Valdez. You call her AOC. I like to call her Al Cortez with a Z, and I have her on comprehensive ignore. You had Gordon Chang on before. He's one of my favorite guys. Thank you for doing that. Sure. Your birthday is coming up Sunday. Mine was a week ago. So happy birthday to you on yeah, thank you. Same day as Melania Trump's.
Nice.
Trump's. Yeah, I thought so too. My question and suggestion to you, quick, is how would you feel about offering relief from college debt in exchange for national service?
I love the plan. Honestly, I think it's a good idea. I've always thought, I love the idea that everybody has to serve for 2 years in the IDF when they turn 18 in Israel. I just thought that was a really good idea. I understand that we don't do it, and we've never had a tradition of requiring service. I do think it's a good thing. I think our standards have always been either too high or right now too low. And it's interesting. I tried to get into the service a number of times, and if it wasn't my weight, it was this, it was that. I mean, they came up with every excuse in the book. And I thought, okay, they just really don't want me. And again, this is going back into, following 9/11 and whatnot. And I'll guaranteed I was overweight, but it seemed to me like they made it really hard. At one point, they asked me, do you have more than one dependent that relies on you for income? And I was like, yes, I have a wife, I have 2 kids. And at the time, I was married. And they said, oh, unfortunately, we can't entertain this right now. And again, just the craziest things that I was told. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And then here we have people that are like, sign me up. I want to have a sex change surgery. And for the last 10 years, they've been getting in. Point is, I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea. I think it strengthens morale as long as you have the right military in place. If you have the Lloyd Austin military in place, the General Milley military in place, then likely people are going to leave the military a lot less enthused about America, a lot less enthused about patriotism, and a lot more motivated to be a big critic of America, which is their right, but I don't think that's what we need in our military. Gary in Ridgefield, Connecticut, thanks for your well wishes on my birthday. I hope you had a great birthday yourself. We continue. One more before we take our next pause and hit you at the second round of the speed round. Let us go to Ozark, Alabama, WDBT, and check in with David. Go right ahead.
Hey, how you doing, brother? I'm
Good.
a Bronx, guy too as well.
Boogie down.
Left Bronx in 1969. Moved to Puerto Rico. Came back in the military.
Oh, cool. Where in Puerto Rico did you live?
I live in Ozark. I'm sorry?
Where in Puerto Rico did you live?
Vega Alta. My father, he had a job, and I don't want to bore you with the story. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
But, this is a national thing, I just had a quick question. A question is, I was interested in the concept of the electoral vote, 270, right? And quickly, there's 2 states that split their electoral vote. Was it Nebraska and the state of Maine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I was always curious, if it would be fair. Okay, I don't want to misinterpret, but I want to make sure that the audience know that I'm a Republican. Okay, so I want to.
Everybody's welcome here, but that's cool, David. Go ahead.
But the point that I'm trying to say is that to make it fair for both parties is the concept of allowing all the districts in each state, based on the concept of as I always notice is that Nebraska and Maine, they split their electoral votes based on their district.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if that would be a good idea to ensure that there's a fair split on the electoral vote. That's all I have to say, and thanks for taking my call, man.
You got it, brother. Thank you for the call. This isn't. I don't think I could answer that because I think this is a state decision that they've made, and they've made through their constitution. The idea of it is, I don't think makes contrast saying that what two states are doing makes the other states unfair, right? I do believe that this is a democratic process, even though we use an electoral college, and we always have for every presidential election we've ever had. I don't think it's unfair to use the electoral college, right? It's a unique construct, unique to America. So I think if the states want to do that, then the states should do that. But I don't think it suggests that what the other states are doing is less fair, because ultimately the democratic process, right, comes from this idea of democracy, right? This majority rule democracy, or I should say winner take all democracy. It's not necessarily, we're not devoid of democracy, but we have the electoral college in place to make sure that, I don't know, if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Oprah Winfrey ran for president, that just based on their sheer popularity, they wouldn't be able to take out the best candidate, right? So we wouldn't have this tyranny of the majority. And I think that's the key part to understand. So I think if that's what a state decides, I leave it to the states. That would be where I land on that. David in Ozark, Alabama, WDBT. Thank you for your call. Folks, we continue with the rest of the speed round straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Let's go to Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. Check in with Paul. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Rich. Yeah, I've had to think about a lot of things since I called earlier because you do so many different stories in the meantime. But what I wanted to say was, I don't know what AOC is smoking half the time. Her and that left squad and everything, them people, they confuse me. I don't get them. And Robert De Niro, too. I put him more in the lines of Robert De Niro. I put him in the lines of a Ted Nugent, but that's the Hollywood sector for you. Now, what I wanted to get to was Donald Trump. I have a prediction to make. We're early in the game, but I do believe that Donald Trump is going to win by a landslide the presidential election. But here's what has to happen. His legal team has to keep him out of jail in the meantime. And for him having that gag order and being threatened to fine by a crooked system such as this man is having to endure, he's not even allowed to tell his side of the story or nothing. It's a bunch of bull crap. And I just think that Donald Trump is going to take this election again. Joe Biden, you better be worried. And I wish you would get on that stage and debate Donald Trump. Do it. Let's see what you got, man.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Michael in Pendleton, Oregon. Paul in Boise, Idaho. Thank you guys for your call. The music means they're kicking me out of here. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America. I'll be a year older the next time I talk to you. I'll be 46 years old. Take care. Good night and God bless. I am Rich Valdez.